Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
I think in all things that we do, if we can take a time to reflect and to really think about how can we add value, or maybe this book of work served its purpose, these 100 episodes, maybe it's complete. We just don't, when you're in it, it's hard to see it that way. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So today we're going to have a bit of an interesting conversation.
Okay.
We are going to talk about this book of work that you and I have put together. I don't know how to say built,
yeah.
And
endured.
Yes, with David, who's here, and you guys don't see, our listeners don't see, but is here all the time. And how we've spent 2 years of our lives, lots of hours, publishing this podcast, and today we want to reflect on it.
Our 100th episode.
Our 100th episode.
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy to me that we started this 2 years ago. In some ways, it feels like it's just
yesterday.
It was yesterday for sure. And I just think we've been through a lot. As it was like this podcast, we've made no bones about it. We wanted to start this because our journey into what I consider effective leadership, both professionally and personally, was a bit bumpier than it needed to be. And we realized through conversations prior to starting the podcast that people wanted to have more applicable knowledge in terms of their leadership journey. They wanted to hear things that validated them. They wanted to hear that other leaders struggle. And I think sometimes because of, especially for like my title and your title of CEO for me and president for you, it can seem like we have all of our shit together and that we struggle less because of our obvious success relative to the business or whatever markers one might suggest. And the reality is that we stumbled a lot along the way, and stumbling is part of learning and growing. And we don't want to replace that for anyone. At the same time, I think there was a lot of things that happened that we could have, with intentional decision-making, being intentional about our own self-awareness, those type of things, we could have avoided. And at least, even if we couldn't have avoided it, we could have at least felt less pain and struggle because of it. Better prepared.
Yeah.
And while there's an endless array, tens of thousands of books on all these subject matters that, if you combine all the things that we've talked about in 100 plus episodes, that you can go find information on. We've read, not all of those, but we've read a lot and studied a lot. We also wanted to condense that learning for you and provide it to you in a very applicable way. So this last 2 years of walking through this journey, and it's fair to say there's probably we don't have 100 episodes of unique content, but we have well over 80. And and so because we've ran some repeats and some things where maybe they hit at a time where we wanted to rerun some things. But if you think about that body of work, it is very, it's a reflection that brings up it elicits a lot of emotions, especially coming from someone who's dealing with a lot of emotions on a regular basis. But I think the number one emotion, and I'd like to know what yours is. I can tell you that for me, it's, I'm very proud about this work, this body of work, as you call it, because it is that. And I think when I tell people that we work on a podcast together, and when I talk about, and maybe they'll go and listen to it on their own, they're like, you have so many episodes. And I started to realize that I guess podcasts, I don't think a lot of people who produce podcasts commit to a weekly podcast, and we did.
Right.
I remember making, I remember making that. That's something I wanted to do, and it being, I didn't think of it as being a heavy lift.
Right. I know.
Yeah, right.
For me, it feels
What's the emotion you feel now looking back, knowing that we're at this moment?
I just am so grateful. I had so much fun. And you know that.
Yes, absolutely.
I love this. I think I was born to do this. Not necessarily be on a podcast, but I've always known I wanted to be in broadcast of some kind. I don't want to be in the center of the stage. For sure. I want to be behind a microphone. And so for me, I don't necessarily want to be on camera. But I do want to be on a mic. I just want to talk.
I do. I think in general, I just want to walk through life with a microphone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, but I want to be
one of those people in New York that stand on the corner. Because that's a thing.
Yeah.
No, like where we just, and that's, back to what you were talking about, the intention of the podcast. I think we wanted at the beginning. So at the beginning, you can hear how we talked. We were a little more rigid.
Oh my gosh. I mean, episode 1, while it's very important. And
we were so uncomfortable.
I remember getting through that and I felt like I just went through, I don't know, surgery, a marathon, you name it, something very difficult. Yeah. And David was like, goodness gracious, loosen up.
He was like, you did it. Now the next one's going to be easier. Now the next one's going to be easier. And what ended up happening was what I think we really wanted, which was to just have a conversation.
That's it.
Instead of like trying to teach you through teaching, we wanted to guide you through our talk. These are things we talk about are no different than what I stand in your office or talk to you about on the phone.
None.
It's just bringing you into listeners, bringing you into our world of talking about these things.
And learning, like part of this journey, we were learning, we still are learning. I wanted to understand trust in a different way. I didn't want to just expect that it's going to happen. I wanted to, we read Atlas of the Heart. We talked about that. And, these topics, vulnerability, the damn truth about work-life balance, the list goes on and on. There are things we wanted to learn more about too. So I think, yes, conversation first and foremost. And then it was things that we've experienced, that we've lived through, that we wanted to share. But we were also very committed from the beginning about this being us learning and learning alongside you. And I think that sticking with that framework really, that's another aspect of what I think brought us both joy.
100%.
And then because of that, just the meaningful conversations that just would, after an episode, or even people that me moving to New York and meeting all these new people, the podcast is just an interesting way for people to get to know us. But then there's just a lot of interesting conversations because early on, our listeners were people we already knew. And, and many of you stuck with us the whole time, and we're just so grateful for that. But then also you sharing it with people that we don't know, and me meeting new people and you meeting new people and sharing our podcast. It's just been an interesting, I would say that when we set out to do it, we stuck to a plan, weekly production. We had a format. We wanted to open with dialogue. We wanted to have a meat of a conversation, and then we wanted to talk about music. And there were times where it was suggested that we should cancel the music moment because maybe some of you are tuning out and not listening to that. But that brought us so much joy. And I was like, if for nothing else, it's Megan and I catching up on, the
hot goss on music. Yeah.
No, but we do know that a lot of you do love that because we get the messages about that too. But yeah, I'm very, very, very proud of doing this, even when there was just a lot of self-doubt early on. There were moments when we were going through our own personal things where I couldn't, I mean, to be honest, there were episodes that had to get canceled because I couldn't personally make it through it. I was struggling with something, and those were tough times. But we stuck with it. And, obviously David's been with us all along, and he's like, wow, I don't have to go to therapy for the next 6 months because these two have done their fair share. So anyway, I think that, again, a book of work that says we were committed to something for 2 years, and you all supporting us through that was just, I don't know. It's a unique experience in life. That's all I can say.
It is. I mean, you've given me, I was going to say, gratitude because you've given me, Danelle, and our listeners have given me the opportunity of my life, a very big opportunity of my lifetime to be able to broadcast the way that I wanted to early on in my life. So I have absolutely loved it. I'm so grateful for it. You funded it. I don't want to I mean, listen, podcasts aren't for free.
No, they're not.
So there are some cool stuff. There's cool things you can do for free, but if you want a sophisticated, I mean, I'm not like trying to put anybody out of business here. I'm just saying like, it's a lot.
It is. And that was another thing we were committed to. And I want to talk about the team and we talk a lot about this in episode 1, but you know, we decided as a company, because this is part of a legacy for me, is that I care about leaving things in a better, more understood way. And as my career has evolved to where it is today, where I'm not in the day-to-day work anymore, I cared a lot about, obviously, you know, putting the company into your hands and where the culture was at its strongest. Mm-hmm. That mattered to me. That was part of the legacy. Leaving the day-to-day of an industry that I've served for my entire career, leaving the day-to-day seat with this industry understanding marketing better than it did when I started this business 20 years ago. That was very, very important to me. And then the leadership piece of it, you know, and I talked about it earlier, that was, again, the legacy of, I want to make sure that I've passed on things that, you know, help people, whatever avenue that is, as a leader, obviously my own company, but then also, you know, an industry with insights and knowledge and all the stuff we got wrong too, you know, in addition to, I'm kind of talking out of context, but in addition to the podcast, we've been blogging for we're a 20-year-old business for over 15 of those years, sharing every single week knowledge about marketing. Every week for free.
From hell or high water.
And we did, absolutely, and we did that for over 15 years. It's probably close to 18 because we started blogging when it wasn't cool.
That's right.
And we blogged all the way through, and I don't even know if it's cool anymore.
Yeah, it's still
Apparently
cool.
it is because I still see that it's being published. So I think, again, it's like when you get to this point, you start to think about what can I do to ensure that I didn't just, you know, transition. What did I leave behind? Did I leave things better? Did I leave, and it's not even about better, but maybe more understood. And I think, you know, for Self Smarter, that's what we wanted. We wanted to bring all of our listeners a bit more understanding. We wanted you to feel less alone. We wanted you to learn things maybe in a way that helped you, like I said earlier, maybe get through some things with a little less bruises and scrapes, and well, there's some gashes out there. Let's be honest. I've got the scars to prove it. But to impart that, and again, to learn alongside everyone too. That's right. I hope that I stay, and I hope you call me out if I don't. If I'm ever in a mode of not learning, then I'm losing.
Right.
And this was part of that.
And so those of you that are listening, thank you, first of all. But you're probably wondering, are you guys like going away? Like that has to be the question, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And the answer is, we're taking a break.
We are.
We need it. We
did. And I think we decided that a break is good. And we have some of the, you know, the mature podcasts out there that we listen to and absolutely love. We've watched them take breaks and we've watched them return with, you know, a whole new energy. You know, there's things that we want to explore, and I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but we did intentionally evolve Be Self Smarter into, obviously we knew the episodes from a podcast perspective. We had made this decision a couple of months ago, and we wanted to get to 100. I was like, I wanted to feel like we had a complete book of work, and we still had things we knew we wanted to talk about. So that was also, and we had some guests that we wanted to also entertain. And I think now, and then we've also invested in free tools and coaching, some other paid services out there on beselfsmarter.com that we can continue to share with all of you. And while we take a break and decide, you know, what is the next chapter for Be Self Smarter? Like, what does that look like for us? And what do you need? And, you know, in terms of support in this vein. And I think this is a time for us to take pause on that and recharge. And even though this brings us immense joy, we have so much fun doing this. It's not about that, but it is about, I think in all things that we do, if we can take a time to reflect and to really think about how can we add value, or maybe this book of work served its purpose. These 100 episodes, maybe it's complete. We just don't, when you're in it, it's hard to see it that way.
Right.
And so it took a while. I mean, obviously I came to you with this suggestion a couple of months ago, and I think it was hard. It was hard for us to think through.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, it in a way it feels a bit goodbye-ish, but I think it is really just, we're gonna take some time to figure out what the future should hold.
Well, and I love what you said too about we need to know what our listeners want. Like, what are they going through? You know, maybe we've served, this has served its purpose. Well, then what?
Right.
Because we've made no bones about it all throughout the life of this podcast that we're ongoing learners.
Right.
It never stops. And we're ongoing practitioners of everything that we talk about every day. And so if that's true, and it is, we'll be back.
Yeah.
It's just what we're going to be talking about. Buckle up, y'all, because
who knows?
You never know. Personally, Danelle and I are both in interesting spots, different spots in our lives and phases. And a pause on the podcast gives us time to really lean into those things. We want to invest time in our business. We're about to blow it up.
Yes, absolutely.
So, you know, it's a good time in the life of the podcast to just kind of pause. Now, what do we want from our listeners? What I would love is if you're listening and you've come this far with us, if you know of a leader who is rising in their career, or if you hear them struggle on a regular basis,
or if you know someone who's in a phase of change. Yeah,
yes.
It could be personally and professionally. I think that's what we hope. And I think you bring up a good point. The podcast is not going away.
Nope.
We're going to take a break on producing new episodes for a bit.
That's right. So next week,
the episodes,
they'll be back.
Yeah,
There'll be an episode.
Self Smarter's out there. You can listen to it on the website, Apple, Spotify, you know, all the places where you might.
the episode.
Yeah, and you pick the episodes. And we always wanted it to be that. It didn't need to be chronological. We wanted to be like, it makes sense to listen to episode 1. And then from there, pick a topic, pick a guest. The guests are so inspiring.
Oh.
And some of our top listen episodes. And
guests.
Our guest. And, you know, that has been a big part of the joy, too, is being able to learn from the folks that we had on here in the enriched conversation. So, yeah, the podcast, it's still there.
That's right.
And it's still a resource for you, just like the things that we have on our website at beselfsmarter.com. So it is what we're pausing, or what we're taking a break from, is producing some new episodes while we fill our tanks and work on some other things.
That's right. Heck, maybe somebody's going to write a book. Wink, wink.
Yes, that is being thought through.
Okay.
Being thought through for sure.
Hot teaser there. All right. I thought it might be interesting. I don't know. Like, I thought this was interesting. As marketers, we can't help but wonder. I think you and I probably would have assumed most of our listeners were on Spotify, because you and I are on Spotify. Daily, all the time.
All the day.
Podcast, music, everything's on. Well, actually, 70% of our listeners were on Apple. So thanks, Apple people.
That's right.
We think y'all are awesome, and we're so glad that y'all listen to us. I know it. Danelle and I what that tells me is Danelle and I completely skewed the Spotify number.
Yeah, we did, because we'd be like, wow. But it did feel good to think that, and because I think our group around here, we're mostly listened through Spotify, but it was good to see that as our audience grew.
Well, that's how we knew it wasn't us.
That's right, because we can skew, because we have to listen to them to prepare the episodes, and we have to do it. You know, we have to sometimes listen multiple times to
catch little things.
So
that we want to share on social or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was good to know. And I think too, if you look at it, we're marketers, we can't help it. We look at the episode numbers, and we have great analytics. You know, David at Snacks Media, that's part of our partnership with them, is they provide really great information so that we understand. So all along while we were producing this, these episodes, we knew that we couldn't just talk about the Enneagram once, because it was such a popular episode. And so that information helped guide us also. The dialogue with you, the feedback from all of our listeners, it certainly guided us, but so did the numbers behind the episodes. And so our number one episode was Why Self Smarter.
That's right, the first one.
First one. And if you think about if you're an active podcast listener, it's just natural to go to the first episode because you want to know the genesis of it. And so that we know that as we gained new listeners all through the last 2 years, and I know that when we would recommend it, we'd say start with episode 1 and then shop around.
That's right.
And so
but they typically do go in order.
Yeah.
You can see if you look at the analytics, you can see the heavyweight is obviously 1 through, the first 50. Yeah. So people are catching up 50 and beyond.
Yes. Yep. You're right. Mm-hmm.
It's fun to see that. Mm-hmm. What about what did you, I mean, I've said it 100 times, but I'm just teeing you up. What's the most popular topic?
Well, I just said it, the Enneagram. And, that it was so interesting because at first, I think, and what's been interesting also is doing this podcast has led to speaking engagements for us. It's led to a lot of opportunities for us. And it's interesting when they want us to come speak, when we've been asked to speak, and when conversations ensue that are more in depth, it's typically about Enneagram.
Yes.
People wanting to know more about themselves, which that just fills our tank.
Yes.
Because it is an expansive learning. You can't learn the Enneagram necessarily in a snap, and that's what we love about it because it's so in depth about how you're wired, and it's about your desires and your hopes. And so what we did is we did the initial one, what's the Enneagram, and I don't think we thought, we're going to do, I don't even know how many episodes we did on the Enneagram.
10, 13.
Maybe at least 10.
At least 10, and over out of 100.
Out of 100, yeah. So, and we did it in different ways, and I think you're going to talk about that in a second. But yeah, I'm not surprised by that. And we listened to all of you, and you wanted more.
Well, I think we assumed that everybody already knew what the Enneagram was.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it was a surprise when what is the Enneagram and why you should care was our most listened to Enneagram episode. So in terms of that, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the second most because then that tells you where they went from there.
Yes.
So the second most was episode 32, which seems like yesterday. It was recorded, but it's actually episode, like I said, 32 out of 100. Part 1, blind spots for your Enneagram type. I feel like we recorded that yesterday, so that's weird. But that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, and people are, what that tells me, and we positioned the title that way, your blind spots, meaning you're going to have to get vulnerable here and address the weaknesses.
Right.
And for that one to be the number 2 episode on Enneagram, that says a lot about y'all.
It does. It says you don't just care about the shiny, good,
That's right.
good parts of us, which we all have. It's the things that where we need work.
Yeah.
And the other episode that showed up on in terms of top Enneagram was improving communication.
Yeah.
So again, 2 things.
Yes, we're weak.
2 areas of the Enneagram where we wanted to improve. Again, it says a lot about our listeners, and I feel like that's been because that's definitely what we cared about.
That's right.
Like the good things are easy. It's the other things. It's the part when we're like, hang in there.
Yeah.
All the numbers struggle.
Right.
So, that was good to see.
In fact, one of the indicators that was the case for us, that people wanted to hear more about weaknesses. And I hope it's okay that I say it that way. What do you say?
Well, it's the way that some of the leaders that I follow in the Enneagram, they talk about the light and the shadow.
The shadow. I want to say dark, but I know that's not right.
It's the shadow. It's the things that we don't necessarily see or know about ourselves. So it's a shadow. And when you study it and you interact with others and you're vulnerable about those things, the light can come in.
Well, we spoke, which was so much fun, in Tennessee, in Nashville. It'll be 2 years ago in September. And during that, I think it was an impromptu thing. You were talking about dominant type 7, the enthusiast, and I said, how many of you who are 7s have lost a cell phone? And all the 7s raised their hands.
Absolutely.
For me, I didn't expect that kind of honesty from them, but they did. And so we were like, wow, we really should be tapping into some of the shadows
Yeah.
so that they can find the light, and just be okay with the fact that if I'm a 7, maybe I have a tendency to lose things. And why is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I still don't have the answer. I'm still studying it.
I really don't either.
But I haven't lost a cell phone in a while. But
I think it's a childlike thing, but like in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, in a good way. Okay.
We're just so excited to get to the next place that sometimes we don't gather our things. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And there goes the cab with my cell phone. Boop, boop. There it goes.
I was so happy to get out.
I know. I just got to move on to the next thing without my cell phone. You guys, all of you out there listening, are everywhere. You're all over the world.
Yeah.
And we could tell ourselves, oh no, everyone's in the U.S.
No.
Well, when you boil it down, actually, you're not just in the U.S.
That's right.
You're everywhere.
So that was interesting too to see.
I like the Australian bit because we do have quite a bit of colleagues in the Asia, Australia,
South Africa.
yes, area, and they all showed up.
Yeah.
I was surprised about the European. That must just be, gluttons for punishment. Just kidding. No, people looking for business leadership
Absolutely.
discussion. So that was fun. All right, let's talk about the episode that got the biggest buzz.
Okay.
Hands down. And I'm not saying it was the most popular. It was up there. But the one that generated talk
Yes.
amongst us, like direct conversations with us and you, particularly, was episode 34. And that was where you talked about your life evolving and your move to New York City. I think people who knew you prior to this episode knew something was changing in your life as life changes. And they were super curious, right? And then you have people who don't know us.
Yeah.
They've been on this journey with you for 33 episodes. And then you hit them up with episode 34 about
Well, I think if we're being fair,
you moving to New York.
I feel like you hit them up with episode 34. So
Okay,
the
that's
context
fair.
around the episode is that we had just done, Megan mentioned it earlier, we had the honor of doing being keynote speakers at a conference in Nashville. And I had already made a decision to start my residency in New York, as we lovingly call it on the episode. And that was Mackie's idea.
And this is somebody who has lived in Dallas, Texas.
Well, all my adult life. And I'm from Texas. So yeah, I've lived in Texas my
kind of
whole
a big
life.
deal.
Yeah, I went to college here and everything. So you brought it up when we were the keynote. It was a session. It was obviously a keynote speech, but then it also was an interactive working session. So we were with these folks for at least an hour and a half. And you had invited me while we were on stage to talk about what I had been through personally, which included a lot of, I struggled for a stint with some depression, and I had to work through because I had so many things changing in my life. And even though I'd been doing all of this work for 8-9 years, this self-awareness work, and it caught up with me, the changes, and there were a lot of changes, and you can listen to the episode if you want. But opening up about that, it was like you could hear crickets, and there was 200 plus people in a room. And I think there was just an immediate compassion and empathy that happened. And then the questions centered around that. So we had a whole Q&A session. So people were very moved by that sharing. And because the point is that I'm a firm believer that in order to be self-aware, this buzz term that we love to use, in order to be self-aware, you have to first, knowledge precedes awareness. Well, what I had learned in my 50th year of my life, dealing with a lot of identity, like just changes, whether it was in the business or personal, I found myself not being agile. And when we talk about the power of agility,
That's right.
and so I had always thought the formula for growth was knowledge. What do I know about myself? What do I know about others? Therefore, then I can start to be in awareness and practice. Awareness is more the practice to me. What I failed to understand is the ability to be agile. So while I was in the seat, the day-to-day running the operation, for example, when I decided to succeed the company to Megan and the leadership team and allow them to run the business, I got all of the pieces and parts of that correct. Prepared you well, did the business piece of it. I forgot one little big, huge thing. What in the hell was I going to do with my time? And then all of a sudden, what does this new identity mean for me? I didn't understand that was part of that succession journey. That's just one example of a thing and then it stacked from there. So I think that, and then once we got to New York, I made the move to New York and you came right thereafter. And then we recorded an episode on that because of the reaction we got in Nashville in this session that we did, this keynote session. So I think then that podcast opened up that discussion even more.
That's right. You know what?
And you know what was great about that episode too? That was a difficult episode for me. And
Sure.
you guided me through that. But I think what helped is that we opened with a funny bit about a bird that got us on a boat. And I think that part of it put me in a position of comfort so that I could openly talk about it. And I had to have that conversation with you and our listeners from a place of maybe if this helps one person be okay, that there's a real, that we can, even though we've done a lot of work, we can still struggle. If I just had to think about that, if I can help one person feel less lonely in that, the way I felt, then it was worth it. It was, and it turns out that, that we're more alike than we are different. And so that I think that's what made that episode so special, even though it's very difficult for me to had that conversation openly with whoever listens. It served its purpose, I believe.
I think so. I want to be honest. When I pitched, when you did that, you were very vulnerable on stage to the point that you made earlier. When I saw everyone's reactions, I think I was a bit my mind let me be misguided on why. I thought they were concerned about you, and I think they were. But I don't think that's all of it. I think they saw themselves in you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think they were watching someone be very vulnerable and honest about depression, change, embracing change, and then diving in head first with the actual movement of it, like putting it into action, which is everyone's fear. I mean, who does? I mean, maybe a lot of people don't want to move to New York City, but like, name your thing. Like, what's the big thing you want to do in your life? Well, do you ever imagine? Like, for me, it's almost hard to imagine it happening because it's so big.
Yeah.
So it was about you. I always thought, well, we should do this because a lot of our listeners are in the industry, and so they're going to listen because they care about you, and that is true. And they also were inspired.
Yeah.
So it was an inspiration for people, and that's why it was so damn popular and why it caused so much buzz, because the words you were getting were like, I think you were getting things like, wow, how courageous.
Yeah.
And then we started studying bravery and courage.
Yes.
It led into another bit, but I I'm just awakening to having this realization that the reason why that episode was so damn popular, it was because of you. But moreover, it was because of your truth and how it connected with people who may be seeking truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that's really something. So yes, Danelle, you've achieved by doing that.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
Grateful for it. Extremely grateful.
For sure. And another thing that I think you've been really vulnerable about to lead us to understand more about and to pave the way for conversation about it is mental and emotional health.
Right.
I don't know that you've labeled it depression until today or recently.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm of a generation.
Yeah, where that's not.
Where depression is considered a weakness. And I'm of a generation where therapy is considered a weakness.
Totally.
And I made a personal decision that I feel like that is something that needs to be corrected. Needs to be corrected. And I thought, well, I shouldn't wait for others to do it. I should do it in my own way and talk about it as, to me, obviously, in a state of depression, it was therapy was necessary in order, and again, the type of therapy, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I did not want to use medicines to overcome what I needed to deal with. I wanted to use my mind. And so, not to say, listen, if you're afraid of flying and you need a Xanny, I mean, you do you. Like, I'm not going to judge that because I can't say that I haven't, needed in an extreme anxiety-induced moment some help.
Sure. I appreciate you saying that.
But because I don't want to cause that. I don't want to put judgment on that. And it's like, I don't want you to have judgment on depression, just like I don't have judgment on therapy. I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves. I personally made a decision that I did not want to use medication exclusively to deal with my issues. I wanted to deal with my issues with a trained professional to help me think differently about what I was struggling with. I think that's different. And I think being comfortable with mental wellness and health is where I decided to shine the light towards. I had to deal with my issues. I had to. But beyond that, on the other side, I was like, I want to talk about mental health. Like, I think it's extremely important. And I think what we're dealing with in today's society, and again, I'm so excited about this generation of our children, you know, Cooper being 17, Mackie Peyton being 23, being surrounded by these young adults. They don't feel stigmatized by it. Mackie chose therapy not because she dealt with depression, but she's like, I want to be a stronger human being. I want to learn more about myself. Yeah, I deal with a little bit of anxiety around auditioning or whatever it is. She's like, but there's help there. And, you know, my parents are supporting me in that, you know, in that effort. And I'm not embarrassed. And most of her friends are in therapy. I don't know what they're dealing with, but it can be a proactive thing too. It doesn't have to always be in reaction into something that needs to be fixed. But we're human beings. There's always something to work on.
That's right.
And I'm still astonished when I hear people talk negatively about therapy. I still am astonished by it. But I've been there. I don't know that I talked negatively about it, but I thought in my mind, boy, I just need to buckle things up. I just need to, you know, as one would say in Texas, put on your big girl panties and do the thing. You just tough it out. Well, we don't want to get up on any further down this rabbit hole, but yeah. So I think that was very important, and I think seeing the response to talking about it in a different way did give me more motivation to continue to bring that to light. I mean, it was hard enough to talk about a 26% approval rating as a leader. That was hard. But then to continue to talk about real life struggles is something that I think this podcast provided an opportunity for us to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think so many of us, you know, to your point about the 26% approval rating, I was going to ask you how it felt, but you said it was very hard, and I knew it was. Mm-hmm. But, you know, to be able to talk about that openly on a broadcast or media, that's a big, you know, nut to take a bite of. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge that. And then I wanted to say, you know, listening, it's definitely inspiring, because you're right. I still don't, and I talked about this, I think, a couple of episodes ago, I'm not comfortable talking about mental and emotional health for me.
Sure.
I'm comfortable talking about it with you.
And all my baggage.
Not comfortable about talking about it with me. So for me, who sits right here at this table, week in and week out, it's an inspiration, and it's courage is what it is. And that's what I think kept people even engaged, not even that, but just like seeing you as a little bit more open. Because it's one thing to be a leader who has it all together and has the hair and the, you know what I mean?
Thanks.
You are. I mean, you're on stages. You have been for 20 years, speaking, coaching, talking. For you to boil it down to that is so helpful on so many levels. So I'm glad to see that our audience got it.
Yeah.
They got it.
Yep.
In terms of the fun times, I want to say this. This is all fun. All of it is, but the most fun thing, there's two things for me, and then I'm going to ask you what your most fun parts are. But for me, the most fun parts are what comes out when we didn't plan it.
Yeah.
And sometimes y'all don't hear that.
Because it has to be cut.
It has to be cut.
And sometimes David has to edit a lot more than one might think.
That's right.
Because we get the giggles.
We get the giggles, or somebody says something completely out of line.
Right.
And, you know, you're like, yeah, you get cut. We can't say that. You can't say that, you know, whatever. But it's not anything like mean. It's more like candor that's not necessary on a podcast. That's one of my favorite things. The second fun thing about this podcast is when we decided we were going to take some things kind of off, and we were going to do with our
Insiders group?
Insiders Club.
Yeah.
And we would pause because a deep thought would come. I love the deep thoughts. The next level thinking, that was fun for me.
Yeah.
And you know, because we could talk about things that were harder. So it wasn't just enough to talk about what we were talking about. Let's go a little deeper.
Yeah.
Which wasn't always easy, but it was super fun.
Yeah, well, good, because I was usually the one having to go a little bit deeper, but
I know.
I'm glad you had fun with that.
Thanks for that. What about you? What was fun?
I think what was fun for me is, and if we've mentioned this, I don't know that we've mentioned this, but kind of our flow for creating episode contents is that we work on coming up with the topics together, or maybe as a team, and maybe from you. I mean, it's not maybe, it's all of those things where we would get inspiration for content. But by far, Megan would prep the episodes in terms of talking points. We tried not to do a lot of word for word. Sometimes we're teaching something so specific we would read from sources we found, and we tried to make sure that you knew when that was happening. But I would say that what was fun for me is just you sending me and saying, here's an episode to review, and I would do it independently because I was, you were in Dallas, I was in New York most of the time, or I was on a plane or whatever. And reading through it for the first time, trying to figure out what the hell you were thinking.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I was like, whoa. And then having to report back that, goodness gracious, that's like the Sahara Desert that's so dry.
Yes.
And you'd be like, really? I thought that I was so, and I think that's just how we do it. And then sometimes I was just dying laughing, going, I am not at all saying that. I don't care what she thinks. And then 9 times out of 10, she would get it out of me some other way.
Yes.
But I think that was fun for me. And then I think sometimes you don't, to show up and to do episodes like this, one thing I will say is it doesn't matter where your mood is. We could be in the best damn mood and have an episode that fell flat. I could be in a damn fetal position dealing with something personal or dealing something with the business that I'm struggling with and still have to come in here. And then I was so scared. And I remember saying this to David a lot, like, man, I don't know how that episode
gonna turn out.
Because in my head, I was almost crying on the inside, but talking through whatever the topic was on the other side. And then when I would listen to it, because I would be scared to listen to it, I knew that David and you had my back, like, and the team. Of course, we're not going to let anything if I'm
go out there,
right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would listen to it and I'd be like, okay, wow. And David would be like, I would have never known. Because sometimes I'd say I was struggling, sometimes I wouldn't. And he was like, I didn't realize that, we were in one of those moments. And so I think I don't know that was fun for me.
Right.
But it was
listening.
Yeah, but it was encouraging. So I think that's the better word for it.
It was like a professional.
Yeah. Well, people who have to, I mean, this is a version of performance, even though it's a more, it's because it's conversation. It's not necessarily scripted. So it's a little bit different. It's almost improv-ish in some way. And we wanted it to be that way.
Yeah.
To not put you guys into coma, not to say that some of my long ass winded answers don't do that for you. But I think that ended up being fun for me, even if in the moment it felt a bit like a little bit of a struggle. So,
got it.
Yeah.
And I knew that. I knew those days, obviously. And I told you, I know you will. Like, it's like the camera light goes on and she turns into another person, which is very enthusiast 7.
Yeah. And I think too, it, in the role of leadership, we have to do that a lot. We could be struggling personally, but people are still depending on us. And it's not like I'm suggesting that you show up as a different version of yourself. Fake.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. It's what did you commit to doing?
Right.
And being able to power through that in an effective way. And what did it was you, the listener.
That's right.
Like you were expecting another episode on Monday or whatever it was, or this is a topic that I know needed to be discussed, even though I was struggling. I remember one of the hardest episodes I ever had to get through was boundaries.
Yeah, we kicked the can on that one for a while.
Right, because I was struggling with, I had felt like I had been in some relationships where boundaries were being almost used as a reactionary tool versus a proactive tool. And I wanted to study boundaries before we talked about it, because I felt like I didn't have a good understanding for it. I knew in the workplace that I had struggled with boundaries early on, which hence the 26% approval rating as a leader. But I learned boundaries in the workplace, but it was something I wanted to study so that when we talked about it, we didn't just talk about it relative to leadership and work, in the workplace, that we talked about it from a human perspective. Because I do think boundaries get a bad rap. And
Totally.
I had that feeling. And I wanted to educate myself and then share that with others. But I remember personally struggling through that. And so is it fun always? No, absolutely not. But is it rewarding on the other side? That's the thing that grew my confidence, that I could show up in here. Is it the easiest thing in the world for someone who deals with abandonment issues to talk about goodbye of a book of work? No, I told y'all, I'm going to struggle through this. But you're like, why? This is a good thing, that we're going to take a break and we're going to recharge and we're going to refresh, and who knows where that's going to lead. And I know historically when I do that in most areas of my life, good things happen. So it's a mindset, and I know better, but I still have to be sometimes reminded of it, which is another lesson. Surround yourself with people that understand what you struggle with, so they can immediately help you out of that moment that's unnecessary.
That's right.
Sometimes the struggle's necessary. This was an unnecessary moment. This is something we should be proud of, and certainly, most importantly, grateful.
100%.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's even hard to see the gratitude. I was thinking about in preparation for this, like something I felt really compelled to talk about was the first time someone came up to me and recognized me as a podcast person.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, first of all, this is separate. This is one of the reasons why I know I'm not a 2 on the Enneagram versus a 9. Mm-hmm. And I've learned this through 48 birthday parties and 48 birthdays and this one instance. Mm-hmm. This woman came up to me. It was a cocktail reception in our industry. Mm-hmm. And I am usually surrounded by a lot of people that we know. We know a lot of people. We love people.
Yeah.
We love to hang out with our friends and in terms of the industry, our colleagues. And she, God love her, bursts into the circle, the group of chatter that I'm having with people. And she's like, I know you. You're Megan from Self Smarter. In that moment, I think my face probably went stoic. Mm-hmm. Like I went from smiling to straight faced. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because I wasn't grateful.
Oh, yeah.
It was because I don't like public acknowledgement.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that in that moment, I just want to fit in here. Like I just want to blend in here. I just want to be, comfortable. And I think she was probably taken aback what could have been perceived as
aloof. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is my worst nightmare. And I've never forgotten that moment. And
but you recovered.
I did. And I talked to you about it.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
And I was like, this happened. And I feel terrible because I was stuck. I was literally paralyzed in the moment. And everybody around me was like, yeah, cool. Yeah. Oh my gosh, but I'm standing there. What? Yeah. What do you mean? Yeah. Yes, I guess that's me. It was so weird.
Because we don't call ourselves podcasters at all, ever. I've never even used that descriptor. I was like, I co-host a podcast with my best friend.
Yeah.
But I don't, I've never used the verb.
Well, and then.
Is it a verb?
What was so interesting is they know us.
Yes.
We don't know them. Yeah. So then I felt very vulnerable. I'm like, I don't know this person. And she knows everything about me. She's like, how's Cooper? I'm like, oh.
Ruh-roh. It happens to me in New York when I meet new people and I mention, and then I don't know if they've listened to it or not. And then all of a sudden we're in our next conversation or at the cocktails or dinner or whatever it is. And
How
it's
did
like,
that thing work out?
I was like, whoa, did I talk to you about that? Because, at 51, now I'm approaching 52, like the memory starts to slip. And I was like,
ma'am.
whew. And then a couple glasses of wine, I'm like, did I tell you that about me? Oh, no, I've been listening to your podcast. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, it is. It's a different thing.
It is because you're an open book and you realize that in a moment. Well, after that started happening a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I was very different. It still was on the inside. I wanted to die slowly. But on the outside, I tried to put us, I know I had to fake through it. Like I had to be like, oh yes, thank you. Because I don't want to be acknowledged. Someone screamed my name.
Yeah. That you've never even seen in your life.
Delightful. Ended up meeting her and inviting her to a cocktail, whatever.
Yeah.
Because I was going to overcorrect.
Yeah.
And the nicest person took a picture. We texted, she texted it to people. I was like, Kim, okay.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm not trying to gloat. I'm literally being very vulnerable about how awkward that was.
No, I appreciate that. And I know our listeners will too.
Yeah. And was there anything weird for you? I mean, other than all the things that you've just talked about?
No. It's all in the episodes.
That's right. That's true. It is all in the episodes. All right. Yeah. Well, I know that I would like for you to say what you want to say, because I know you want to say thank you.
Yes. I mean, if you think about 2 years ago, and just probably 3 months before that, just telling the team, look, I want to do something. I've been encouraged by folks that I've, in speaking engagements and things that I've been saying on stage, and people are following up with me. And by this time, we'd been listening to podcasts for, at least 6 or 7 years, or more than that, probably.
Yes.
And, I think I want to give this a try. And I think the team at the time asked me the most important question, why? And I had to go back and reflect on that. Like, what did I really want this to be? And, we talked about it, throughout this episode and before, is that I really wanted it to be, a gift to our listeners, but in a sense of sharing real things with you, but then also a gift to me as well, in terms of the fact that I want to be on this learning journey. So it mattered to me. I didn't care about it being revenue generating. It wasn't a business move. This was about legacy. This was about learning. And so the team took it from there. We treated this like anything else we would do with our clients or potential clients. From a branding perspective, they took me through everything. The naming, that was a couple of month process. Then we came up with, our incredible creative team came up with the aesthetics. I think Marcy led that effort from the marketing side of it and did an incredible job. We had a whole messaging, again, all the things that you probably hear in the advertisements, if you listen to them or know about our work, they took me through that. So that team, it was our entire company. And so to list all those, but then we created a Self Smarter team, and that was Marcy, as I said, obviously Megan and I, and Jordan and Jesse and Henna and Mary Kate. Everybody essentially has worked on some aspect of Self Smart, but we kind of had this core team that led it as if it were a paying client. It wasn't a paying client, but I sure did hug everybody a lot. They got lots of hugs and thank yous. But
and Hannah, from an HR perspective,
that's right, working through that. Yes, I can't. Yes, absolutely.
She was so eager to talk to. She'd be like, "Yes, let's."
Yes, she did great. And so and I'm sure again, I could name 10 other people that made it all happen. Mackenzie and then our creative team. So everybody in the company, like I said, eventually touched it. And then, but we had the heavy lifters for, the 100+ episodes. So just so grateful for that group that, really all of us that believed in it. And I think that's what I was looking for. I was kind of searching for some words, but it was a belief from the get-go. And even when, we thought we had some great ideas, some of the episodes that we thought about or some of the marketing things to get the word out, if it fell flat, it wasn't any give up thing. And even when I think you and I would be fatigued, or we would lose our creativity or our thinking around it, the team would come through. Or one of you listeners. And so I do want to thank the team. And then I cannot say enough about our partners at Snacks Media, led by David. We talk about David a lot and his crew. And one of the biggest compliments we get reoccurring compliments that are universal to the episodes, is that Megan and I have a great rapport. Clearly there's a lot of trust there. And then whether it's led with that, it's led with the quality of the production of your podcast is second to none.
Yes.
They assume that we've been doing this for, where are your other podcasts when we don't have any other podcasts? Why does your podcast sound so much better than the the non-celebrity versions of podcasts that are out there. And I was like, because we committed to and invested with a partner who cares so much about the work that they do equally to the work that we're trying to share. And that partnership took off from day one. And so that wasn't, we owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to David and his team at Snacks Media. For sure. So with that, if you're even thinking about doing this, do it the right way. Mm-hmm. We don't regret that 1 minute is the investment that we made in our podcast being something that you wanted to listen to, because there wasn't a bunch of static and, their editing process is so fluid. And I can't tell you, like, some episodes we get through without any cuts, and then sometimes we'll have 17. So you have to think that there's a team that's making all of that sound fluid for you to where it's not choppy and we're saying a bunch of crazy things. So
one thing we definitely want to call out is how wonderful our guests have been.
Yes.
Some of our more popular episodes, most listened to episodes, were because of our guests.
Absolutely. And again,
all of them.
We never thought the guest episodes, we were just there to learn,
100%.
Listen and learn and be inspired. And then just to encourage the vulnerability in terms of, and we didn't even have to encourage it. It just was, I don't know if we lucked out by the folks that we chose.
Well, I think we chose people that we were enamored by.
Yes. And that
we knew.
And there were stories that we knew would relate to our listeners.
And sometimes we didn't know all the story.
No.
So we would get into the episode and be like, oh.
Right.
Particularly, I want to call out Julie Harper's episode 1. Mm-hmm. I knew some of that story, but I didn't know all of that story. If you haven't listened to that,
yes,
go back and do yourself a favor and listen to that.
Right. And I think too, the journey of anyone who has found themselves in a position of, that they've had to change in their life, or that they accomplish things.
Yes.
What they did, what they struggled through to get there. I mean, it's just, it's storytelling at its best. And you and I we didn't have to show up much for those episodes. No. All we had to do was just sit there and listen and support. And yep. So I think it goes without saying that our guests really enriched this body of work.
100%. So thank you. Mm-hmm. You know who you are out there.
And then obviously those are, the team at DMA that has brought this to life, certainly our partners at Snacks Media, but most of all, it's you, the listeners, mm-hmm. which includes all of those people too, but it's you, the listeners that listened and maybe you took a pause and then you came back, or, those that sent us text messages, those that message us on social media, all of it, it meant a lot to us and it kept us going. That you have no idea. There'd be moments where I was like, well, maybe I need a break for a minute, but then I would get a message and then it would be somebody I know or somebody I didn't know would say, wow, that really stood out to me. And sometimes it was fun. It was more about the music moment, or most of the time it was about the content. Yeah. And that kept us going. So, in terms of gratefulness, and then the fact that you would we provided something that you felt like sharing with someone else was one of the greatest moments that brought us so much encouragement at times. That's a compliment that I can't even describe what that feels like. So thanks to everybody involved with this. And we certainly did not do an ounce of this alone. So thank you so much for all of that. And as we continue down the path and wherever this takes us next, this team will be supporting us as well. And hopefully you, our listeners, will follow along with us to what we have in store, whatever we're working on next. So thank you.
Thank you, Danelle. I know on behalf of Snacks Media and our team and our listeners, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being vulnerable and leading us in this way and having this idea about Self Smarter. Mm-hmm. That's the visionary. This is how knowing yourself and knowing what your strengths are in a leadership position and having an idea that births into making a difference. That's what you've done. That's what you've done for all of us. So thank you. Before we transition to Music Moment, I think it's only fair that we talk about what we think is next, or where are we going from here?
Yeah, obviously, speaking engagements, we have some lined up, and we're really grateful for that. So, again, we continue to do, I think the things that we're talking about on this podcast has led to interest in us coming and sharing more about particular topics, or just in general about the journey of being self-smarter.
Right.
So we love that. And, we're very excited about that. That is in motion. You mentioned it. We've talked about it. I know we talked about it on the guest episode with Sarah Hill, my dear neighbor in the apartment building, just amazing CEO. She has a background in book publishing, and it's something that I'm thinking about, and I know I'm being encouraged by the same team that made all of this come to life that we just thanked. It have also been encouraging you and I to be thinking about a book. It's less daunting for you and extremely terrifying for me.
Only because I like to write.
Right. And I don't. I like to talk. So while I was terrified to do a podcast, that became something I became more comfortable with. Yeah, I struggled in some weeks, but in general, I realized that you love it for one reason doing the podcasting, and I learned that I liked it for another reason, but the combination worked for us. But I'm interested in a book. I've been studying about writing books. I have some friends now in publishing in New York that are going to be very helpful in that decision-making process. But I'm interested in that. And then what I hope, and I think that I speak for all of us in this, is that we do want new episodes. I think what we have to figure out is, and what I want to be inspired by, is the direction. Do we stay in this lane of leadership that's predominantly discussed in terms of the workplace and what we've experienced as leaders in business? Or do we expand this more into the human condition side of things, which is always important to me? We have plenty of episodes about things that touch us no matter what, being vulnerable, learning to listen, communication styles, those type of things. But I think there's a lot more that I'm preparing to talk about in the next phase of my life. And you and I are already having those conversations for both of us. I can only speak for myself when I say I'm trying to get more comfortable about what does the next book of work look like relative to those topics. You and I are pretty passionate about certain things in life that maybe we've learned that's been different to anything we've ever experienced. And so is that a lane that we could learn from and start to engage in? Because I think we feel very comfortable that we have the team to market anything that we do. We have the team to produce anything that we want to do. I think it's on you and I to really, truly, and any feedback from our listeners, explore what else is there to be talked about. Because I do feel good about this book of work and what it represents. I believe in my heart there's more. And maybe it doesn't fit in this particular lane of leadership. Maybe it's something more expansive. So that's it. I think learning into possibilities, I think, is the number one priority in this break that we're taking.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Thank you. And I can't wait to ride that journey with you. We're going to be writing this book. I can't wait.
Yeah, exactly.
And who knows what else, to your point. I know what people want to hear about. You know what people want to hear about. We need to organize it. So if you are listening to this, I hope you feel encouraged. If you love us, we love you back. We'll be back.
Yeah.
In what media? I don't know, ? But we'll be back.
Yeah.
So stand by for more. And again, I want to reiterate too, what Danelle said it earlier, we're not going anywhere. This podcast will live out there. So encourage, I'll go back and listen to it again.
Oh yeah.
So fun.
It is.
Okay. Well, let's transition to music moment.
All right.
So I had some questions teed up, but I think I'm going to ask you something different.
Okay.
I mean, do you have any new music goals in 2024?
I do.
Anything you're curious about?
It's so funny that you're going to ask me that too, because I just had this conversation this week. I didn't talk about it on the episode where we talked about looking at 2024 as a time period where we can commit to some things. I have decided, though, I want to invest some time in seeing live performances for artists that aren't at the top of their game yet, that are on the rise up. So Maggie Rogers, Maggie Rose. So there's this group of artists that I think are, again, they're not at the Miley, Taylor.
Right.
And Brandy's not in many ways to most people, but for us it is. Yeah. Am I going to go see Brandy Carlisle in 2024? Absolutely. We will be doing that. But when I think about, I want to really commit, and I want to go to venues in New York that aren't Madison Square Garden, Carnegie Hall. Like I want to explore other venues and other places, not just in New York, but the medium size that were those artists that are still finding their way, but are writing incredible music. So that's kind of what I hope to do.
It's so funny that you said that because last week I was listening to Maggie Rogers and I was thinking and remembering about her Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah.
She was in my top 5 and she did a private message.
Same with me. I thought it was just for me, but now I'm kind of pissed.
She's like,
I thought I heard her say Danelle.
I'm so grateful for you. No, but I was thinking how wonderful that was that she did that and how much I respect that she did that.
Yep.
And wow, wouldn't I like to see her in 2024.
Support her. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And randomly, I think I told you this, I saw a woman at an airport somewhere in the U.S. It wasn't Dallas. And she had a Maggie Rogers t-shirt on. And I stopped her and I was like, I love Maggie Rogers. Where did you get that t-shirt? And she's like, oh my gosh, I went to a concert. It was like $50. Yeah. And she was like, I didn't know who she was walking in the door, but she goes, man, I'm a super fan.
Super fan. Yeah.
So that just tells you how well she performs. Anyway, but to your point, there's some authenticity relative to that journey. And I think another thing you and I enjoy, to your point about Carnegie and Madison Square, great places. It's like American Airlines here in Dallas.
Yes.
It's huge. It's beautiful. And you've got Cowboys Stadium, which, come on.
Yeah.
Great. We tend to have an emotional connection to the artist and the music. It's very emotional for both of us and for people that we tend to travel with whenever we want to see things like this. Being outside. I have realized that being outside, even if I'm at Smirnoff in July.
Oh gosh, that's here in Dallas.
That's here in Dallas. I
So
don't even
we're
think
melting.
it's called that anymore, but it's
not.
an outside venue. But I've seen some of the best performances I've seen Pearl Jam there. I've seen The Cure there. I've seen Dave Matthews Band multiple times there, and Brandy with You.
Yes.
And I've seen other people, but those are the highlights. Every one of those is a key memory in my life.
Yeah.
Music memory. And so what I am hopeful for in 2024 is, we talked about the Gorge the other night in Washington.
Yeah.
I want to make that happen.
We're going to the Gorge.
Have to do that.
Yes.
If y'all haven't been to Red Rocks, I mean, I talk to people all the time that have never been.
Yeah.
What are you waiting for?
Yeah, Red Rocks for sure.
Do that. And now the Sphere, I'm lucky that I checked off that box in 2023, but my hope
And
for
you've inspired me to do it. Yep.
Yes, in 2024 is that you find your way there for music.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be other things that they have there, but definitely all of you find your way, because again, I've said this before, but it's the future of performance art.
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to be ready for that.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Anything else on music, D?
No, that's
All right.
it.
Well, we're going on a break.
We're going on a break. So goodbye for now. If you've listened to this episode and you're thinking and you want to share something with us in terms of anything that, that would lead us to consider, please don't be shy about sharing with us, which most of you aren't, but really appreciate that feedback. So thanks so much.
Hey, everybody.
All right.
Thank you so much. We send you into the future with grateful hearts.
Yes, we do. Thank you again. Bye. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcast. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.